Tonight, a cost of living emergency is declared. Unions say pay rises and rent freezes are needed as inflation pushes prices up and up.
I've got 3 children and I'm on my own, so the struggles are real. And every day I'm going to the shops and not being able to afford anything.
Also making the headlines, a battle on the buses. A shortage of drivers means operators are struggling to keep services running. In sport, the fixtures for the new season are announced.
And a to-do over a Ducat, which the council wants to demolish.
I'm Emma Cameron in Edinburgh.
And I'm John Mackay in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6.
Good evening. Trade union leaders and community groups have declared a cost of living emergency as rising food and energy bills pile pressure on household budgets. The STUC and the Poverty Alliance held a summit to discuss how to tackle the issue.
The groups are demanding the Scottish Government do more, including increasing public sector pay and freezing rents. Ministers say they're investing hundreds of millions of pounds to help those struggling most. Our political correspondent Ewan Petrie reports.
In the shadow of Edinburgh Castle and some of Scotland's most expensive restaurants, this food bank is facing big demand for emergency food parcels.
The food and all that's brilliant, and the people who donate it are brilliant, but I think it's disgusting that on this day and age British people have got to go to food banks.
I've got 3 children and I'm on my own, so the struggles are real. And every day I'm going to the shops and not being able to afford anything.
Now's the time for us to demand that the exploitation of working people stops here.
Trade unions and poverty campaigners united to call for the Scottish Government to do more to tackle the cost of living crisis. Around 40 organisations gathered to discuss support for people facing rising energy and food bills.
People are coming to us not just asking for an ordinary food parcel, but asking for a food parcel that they can eat with it when they've only got access to a kettle because they can't afford to put the oven on, or they haven't got a kitchen and equipment to use. More and more people asking for a hot water bottle with the food parcel just to try and keep warm.
The Scottish Government is investing almost £770 million in measures, including doubling the Scottish child payment. While welcome, unions say it's not enough.
They could be putting in immediate rent freezes, they could be upping public sector pay in line with current levels of inflation, which would then have a positive impact across the rest of the country. And most importantly, they could be using their tax powers far more effectively to tax the rich, whether that be through business taxes or whether that be through personal taxation.
Council workers took their fight for a pay increase to the door of their local authority employers, COSLA. Among them a care worker struggling with rising costs.
I was paying £150 a month for my electricity. I went up to £246 and in October I'm going up to £300 something. Price of diesel. Sooner or later we're not going to be able to run my cars. Some of the care workers are refusing to take their cars to work now.
Thousands of council staff are being balloted for strike action. A walkout would affect waste and cleansing services and close schools.
We've got to demand from the Scottish Government that we get a decent pay rise. Our workers are the ones that went into homes when we couldn't care for our vulnerable. Our workers went in and cared for our vulnerable. To say that they're only worth 2% now is unacceptable.
Without meaningful negotiations, unions warn there will be mass industrial action in the coming months.
Well, Ewan joins us now. So Ewan, how significant is this declaration of a cost of living emergency?
Well, I think it demonstrates the sense of frustration at what these organisations consider to be a lack of meaningful progress when it comes to tackling the issue of rising costs. So the aim here really is to try to reframe the discussions around this issue and to instil a sense of urgency in the governments, both at Holyrood and in Westminster. So while it might appear to be a small change in language, these groups are hoping that it leads to a big change in impetus. And this really is directed at both governments. Many of those attending that summit here in Glasgow are heading down to London for a national demonstration outside the Houses of Parliament tomorrow. So expect to hear a lot more calls for action like this in the coming weeks and months.
Indeed, Jane. Many thanks for that.
The manager of a Lanarkshire bus company says the company will struggle to survive if they can't fill driver vacancies. A large number of staff have left JMB Travel to join the HGV industry.
The company currently has 25 vacancies but says it can't compete with the higher wages being offered to drive lorries. Larger firms are also struggling with staff shortages, as Susan Ripple reports.
Kyle is going through safety checks before a lesson to become a bus driver. She's one of the first to go through JMB Travel's training school, having previously worked for the company as a cleaner.
It's a great opportunity. It is scary to start with, you know what I mean? You have your width, your length and all that to thinking and things like that, but it's daunting at first, but you get there.
And the cost for Kyle to go through her training is being covered by the company. They've started funding places because they're finding it hard to employ qualified drivers.
They normally run 28 buses, but they've had to reduce that recently by 17% just to keep up with demands for their services. And at the moment, they've got vacancies for 25 drivers.
Many have left to join the HGV industry, but the company can't compete with the higher wages they're offering.
The government certainly pushed it. They wrote a letter to everyone who had a Class 1 licence and asked them, your country needs you, come back and drive a lorry, get food on the shelves and things. It's posing a significant challenge for the business, and we simply can't continue to run the level of service, even at the reduced levels we're running at the minute, without getting new bodies into the business. It's just not viable anymore.
Larger firms are also struggling to fill vacancies. Reese is one of First Bus's newest recruits.
I loved the 3 weeks training. I just remember at one point we're driving over the Erskine Bridge and the sun was setting, and I was like, wow, I actually get paid to do this job, and that's when it really set home for me that this is a job I want to do.
The company is down 300 staff on pre-COVID levels.
We're in a very competitive job market where we're having to compete against other sectors which we historically haven't had to do in the past. So you've seen the expansion of home delivery, warehouse operatives, and the large salaries that are now available to people to drive lorries in the HGV sector. All these are having a massive impact, and not to mention we're now seeing the impacts of Brexit.
Transport Scotland says the financial support it gives operators needs to remain fit for purpose, and it'll continue to review the funding needed to support services. But a lot needs to change to get things back to pre-COVID levels, and for companies like JMB Travel to survive. Susan Ripple, STV News, Glasgow.
An unsanctioned strike involving 200 workers at a former Bifab yard in Methil has been called off. It emerged today staff from a Portuguese subcontractor had downed tools, claiming they hadn't been paid.
Unions stepped in to speak with management, who described the industrial action as illegal. Callum Clark reports.
This was the state of play this morning. Staff walking out for a third day of strike action.
They will not return to work until they have trade union recognition.
But just a couple hours later, after unions met with management, a resolution had been reached.
The management have given us a solution. We've taken it back to the workforce, and the workforce have accepted that and gone back to work.
Unions say issues first arose on Tuesday night. A Portuguese subcontractor, which has around 120 workers at the Fife Yard, told staff they weren't going to be paid. They then refused to leave their cabins, and the other local workers also went on strike in solidarity.
It was a close run thing whether the men would return, but eventually when they decided that they would go back, because 3 out of the 4 demands have been met.
Santa Cruz, the Portuguese firm which employs the majority of workers, told unions it didn't receive payment from Harland and Wolff, but the company rejects this, describing the action as a wildcat strike. So unions say they've been assured staff will face no disciplinary action and will receive full pay for the period they've been on strike, around 2.5 days. The next step is a further meeting will take place at the end of next week, where we expect Harland and Wolff to provide full trade union recognition. Harland and Wolff pulled the former Bifab yards in Methil and the Isle of Lewis out of administration last year. It came after years of financial struggles. This issue seems to have been resolved very quickly. Unions hope it will provide workers more security. Callum Clark, STV News.
Widespread racism in the medical profession is wrecking the lives of many doctors and forcing some to leave their jobs. That's one of the stark findings in a report published by the British Medical Association.
It warns of a mass exodus of staff due to persistent and intolerable levels of racism and says there's a systemic failure across the NHS that must be tackled. Doctors in Scotland have told STV News of their experiences, as Louise Hosey reports.
It's like having 1,000 paper cuts. It's very small things that chip away at you over time and make you feel disenfranchised or a bit demotivated.
Dr Amar Iqbal says racism in his profession shows itself in various ways. It's rarely overt, but it's there.
Working twice as hard as people you know that you're better than, just to get on a level playing field. When patients hear my voice and then see me, they sometimes do a bit of a double take because they think, "Oh, you clearly don't look like how I thought you were going to look. You've got a skin tone, you've got a beard. You sound like you're Scottish, but you don't look." Some people have openly remarked on that.
A new report by the British Medical Association has identified widespread racism within the medical profession. Almost a third of doctors surveyed said they'd considered leaving the NHS. It's warning the profession now faces a mass exodus of staff.
If I can put it into one single word, it's mostly exclusion. Exclusion from probably career opportunities, more scrutiny of their work, social exclusion, simple things like mispronunciation of their names and othering when you see that despite doing a good job, you're not getting further opportunities and things like that. That's got a negative impact on the morale and more so on physical and mental health.
Another GP says more education is urgently needed.
It's that awareness, broadening your mind, realising that people are still, human beings, even if they look different. So I think teaching cultural competence, even right from the nursery schools, letting the little children know that someone of a different colour doesn't mean they're still human. And having that empathy and acceptance, I think that will go a long way to help.
The Scottish Government says there's no place for racism or any other discrimination in the NHS. It says it's working to address staff concerns, including a new NHS Ethnic Minority Forum. Louise Hosey, STV News.
And sticking with health, Scotland is in the grip of a new wave of COVID infections being driven by 2 Omicron variants. That's according to a public health expert. Well, our political reporter Laura Alderman joins me now to discuss this. Laura, what's the picture?
Well, I think these figures make it clear, Emma, that although restrictions are gone, the virus certainly isn't. These new figures show that 1 in 30 people in Scotland had COVID. Compare that to England, it's 1 in 50 there. But the good news is that so far this is not leading to a huge number of people going into hospital with the virus. Now, Professor Linda Bald from the University of Edinburgh, she said this was to be expected. We're going to see cases spike every 3 or 4 months or so, but we are now firmly in the grip of another wave of COVID. I think what's surprising is that we're seeing these high figures in the summer. Normally, over the last 2 years, we've seen cases spike in the winter when we're indoors, socialising indoors, where it's more likely you'll catch the virus. But here we are, pretty much in summer now, with these high case rates.
But Laura, how much of a risk does this pose to the more vulnerable groups?
Well, as you know, the shielding list ended just a couple of weeks ago. But for many people in that vulnerable group, life is going to go on as it was. The virus is still very much a threat. So this news will probably be quite worrying for them. But there is a spring booster dose that's being offered at the minute. The JCVI is recommending another dose for the autumn period that will likely be given to care home residents, staff, frontline care workers and also those in the most vulnerable groups. But on restrictions, Linda Bald was saying today that although cases are rising, it's unlikely restrictions will come back in. It would need to be a phenomenal number of cases that the vaccines would struggle to protect us against. And at the moment, thankfully, that's just not the case.
OK, Laura, many thanks for that. Well, a look now at other stories across Scotland, and a forensic expert who examined a protective vest worn by a police officer colleagues claim was stamped on by Sheku Bayo has told a public inquiry she found nothing of relevance or anything that looked like footwear on it. Laura McPhee was giving evidence about the item worn by PC Nicole Short. The inquiry is looking at the circumstances of the death of Mr Bayo after he was restrained by officers in Kirkcaldy in 2015.
3 men have been sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Graham Williamson in August 2020. The 26-year-old was shot at his home in Caithness Street in Blantyre. The men had earlier denied the charge, but the judge ruled this was a premeditated murder by drug dealers in order to further their criminal interests.
The Hibernian footballer Ryan Porteous has been ordered to pay compensation to a woman after pleading guilty to hitting her with a tumbler during a night out in Dalkeith in February. The club have released a statement fully condemning the actions and have given the defender the maximum possible fine internally.
Glasgow's Hydro could play host to next year's Eurovision Song Contest. Ukraine, who won this year's competition, have been ruled out of hosting the 2023 contest due to the ongoing war with Russia. The UK has been asked to take on hosting duties, with Glasgow being shortlisted as a potential venue.
The First Minister has spoken out about her experience of going through the menopause in the hope it will demystify the process for other women. Nicola Sturgeon says she feared how going through the menopause would affect her work and political life and is calling for attitudes to change on the issue. She's speaking at Flushfest, the world's only menopause festival, which began today online.
It's also a subject matter that I don't yet feel, maybe never will feel, instinctively really comfortable talking about because it is so intensely personal. But it's something that is a fact of life for every woman, and therefore there's a responsibility. I would never force any woman or put pressure on a woman to talk about it, but where we think we can help with this, I think there's a responsibility on women like me to try to help make it a bit easier for future generations.
For too long it's been shrouded in silence. Now that has changed in recent months and years, but for a long time nobody talked about it, and then it was a huge shock to people when they experienced menopause themselves or their loved ones or colleagues did. So it's a kind of education thing. People can talk about it more, normalise it, laugh about it, hear other people's experiences, get some tips on how to get through it.
A pigeon loft built on wasteland in the Gorbals has been saved from destruction after an outpouring support by the local community. Ronnie McCann, who made the structure during lockdown, was ordered to have it removed by today. But after protests this morning, he was handed an 11th-hour reprieve. He now has 6 weeks to change the council's mind, as Caroline Lewis reports.
Despite the dismal weather, locals came out in force to protect what's become a much-loved community project. The structure was a lockdown passion for Ronnie McCann, who used his love of pigeons to transform his local area.
Before I came here, it was all overgrown. You couldn't walk down the path. There was graffiti all over the wall, and it was a horrible wee space. All I'd done was put a few before and after photos up on Facebook, and I can't believe the support it got for the local area and the local community. I didn't know it was going to go to this extent. I really didn't, but it has, and that makes it all more worthwhile for me to do it.
However, Ronnie was left devastated when the council ordered him to tear it down. But the community was in full support of his hard work.
I've got people coming and speaking to me in the local community. People are feeling safe walking through it. They wouldn't even come through here. They have to go down the other way. And they sit in the summer and just come round, have a coffee and sit down. Even people with their kids come round and Ronnie lets them in and sees the pigeons and all that and the wains love it.
But this morning, at the 11th hour, he was granted a reprieve and now has 6 weeks to prove the loft's worth, which some say is already evident.
We work for a local charity who supports people in recovery from alcohol and drug addiction, and this space gives them somewhere to go, helps them with their mental health and gives them something to do, and it's a safe space for them to come to.
Despite today's success, questions still remain over the project's future. But for now, this community will certainly keep fighting in hope that it stays. Caroline Lewis, STV News.
Time for the sport now. Here's Raman.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
Good evening. Celtic will begin the defence of their Premiership title at home to Aberdeen. These are the fixtures on the opening weekend of the season, and Postecoglou's side welcome the Dons on Sunday, July the 31st. Rangers kick off their campaign away to Livingston. St Mirren host Motherwell. Kilmarnock are at home to Dundee United. It's Hearts against Ross County, and Hibs travel to St Johnstone. The first Old Firm derby will take place at Celtic Park on the weekend of September the 3rd. The next derby is at Ibrox on January the 2nd, with the final derby before the split on the weekend of April the 8th. Now, Kilmarnock manager Derek McInnes admits he's looking to recruit a lot more players ahead of the new season. After winning the Championship, the Rugby Park side are back in the Premiership, and in time, he wants Killie to be a top 6 side. Back on the training ground, the Kilmarnock players' preparations for their return to the top flight are underway. After securing his first task of getting Killie back in the Premiership, Derek McInnes has high ambitions for the club.
Well, I think in time, certainly we want to make sure we're a top 6 side. Whether we can achieve that this season remains to be seen, as I said. But we've seen other teams be successful through cup competitions. We've seen Kilmarnock itself, not so distant past, have won cups. We want to try and make sure we can try and be in time competing at the top end of the table for European spots.
Alan Power is back for a second spell at Kilmarnock, while former Celtic youth player Ken McInroy has also joined the club. How much business do you think you still have to do?
Lots. Still got lots to do. I think it's fair to say that we're delighted with the players they've gave us. We've got some good players in the building, and for us to be as strong as we can be, we've got to try and utilise the budget that's been afforded to me the best way we can. So there's lots to do. You don't always get what you want, and signing good players isn't always easy, but we've got a lot of good work to be done in recruitment.
Kilmarnock start their campaign with the visit of Dundee United before back-to-back games against Rangers and Celtic.
It's a good start, isn't it? Every game's going to be a challenge, so to have the Old Firm in the first 3 games, it's going to be difficult, but Dundee United is what we focus on for the first game of the season, so it'll be a nice game for us.
Bobby Madden has resigned as a referee in Scotland to take up a new role with the English FA. Madden, who became a FIFA referee over 20 years ago, has been a match official in more than 1,000 games north of the border. He is moving to England for personal reasons. To rugby, and Scotland captain Grant Gilchrist believes the blend of youth and experience can reinvigorate the squad as they prepare for their summer tour of South America. Gregor Townsend will be without the injured Adam Hastings and Hugh Jones for a tour that will incorporate an A-team match against Chile and 3 tests against Argentina.
I remember when I was the age of some of the guys, I've been rooming with Ollie Smith, who's 10 years younger than me, which is a sobering thought. But these guys coming in full of energy, they challenge us to be better, and the amount of energy and enthusiasm they got about the rugby, it's infectious, and that's going to be really important for us as a squad.
Athletics, and Jake Whiteman says he's still got work to do. That's despite breaking a 40-year-old Scottish record in the Dream Mile in the Diamond League last night. Whiteman's third place finish behind winner Jakob Ingebrigtsen took down a Scottish mile record held by Graham Williamson since 1982. And that, folks, is all your sport tonight. Have a great weekend.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
Sean has the weather forecast, and surely it can't be any worse than it was this morning. And guess what? It won't be.
So a rather disappointing start to the day for many of us. A lot of heavy rain around as well. That cloud and rain clearing away. Much clearer skies coming in from the northwest, but there will be some scattered showers and blustery weather in the north of the country, but not looking too bad for most of us this weekend. Rather cool tomorrow, mind you. Let's look at what's in store for you.
The outlook for the day is calm and settled. TUI Blue Hotels sponsor STV Weather.
Well, it wasn't too great out there earlier on with that heavy rain, but that little jaggy weather front came to the rescue through today. Of course, that is a cold front. It swept away the cloud, the rain, Also bringing in fresher air and breezier conditions to the northwest. Temperatures tonight, perhaps Lanarkshire, the Borders, Dumfries and Galway, down to lows of about 6 or 7 degrees. So a little bit of a nip in the air further south, where we hang on to the breezier conditions further north, 10 degrees Celsius. Now, there will be a few scattered showers around as we go into tomorrow, predominantly across the Highlands, northern Argyll. Elsewhere, the showers very isolated, a lot of dry weather with sunshine, central and southern parts, but it will be rather breezy, especially in the northwest. Let's take a look at what's in store for you tomorrow afternoon. Now look at the temperatures, that's what I want to point out first of all. Look at that, 12, 13, 14 degrees, pretty disgraceful stuff given the fact the solstice is next week. We've got the breeze around, so it will feel quite cool. You can see those showers, Col, Tyree, around the Small Isles, Mull, and also perhaps a few coming into Colonsay by the end of the day. But further south, central and southern areas, a lot of dry weather with sunshine. Again, our temperatures here, only 15, 16 degrees Celsius, that breeze. But if you've got a wee sun trap in the garden, of course remember UV levels don't get much higher. The sun very strong now, so it should still feel quite warm in that sunshine despite only being about 15 degrees. On Sunday, a lot of dry and bright weather, temperatures rising ever so slightly, and next week again it's a bit of a mixed bag. Bye bye.
TUI Blue Hotels sponsor STV Weather.
And finally this evening, domes of lights, winding paths and bursts of colour are coming to Inverclyde this weekend. A giant inflatable luminarium has popped up outside the Beacon Arts Centre for the Meloria Festival.
It's aiming to bring people in the community together again following the pandemic. Inspired by the motto on Inverclyde's crest, the festival is encouraging people to look forward to better things ahead this summer. Vanessa Taff has been along to see what it's all about.
Entering a chamber of light and wonder, this inflatable architecture is designed with relaxation in mind.
Absolutely amazing, like all the patterns on the roof are so calming, peaceful. It's colourful and comfy.
Do you like lying down?
Yeah. I like how it's really nice and calming and beautiful. It's really colourful and there's lots of bright lights. It eases your mind and it's really beautiful to just lie down and have a nap.
Do you feel quite sleepy in here?
Yeah.
The installation is part of the Meloria Festival. It hopes to bring the community together again after tough times during the pandemic.
The Meloria name is about making things better, about reconnecting with the community and certainly to provide something that's fun and entertaining. It's great to see the communities coming back and being able to participate in lots of different arts events, and many of them are free over this weekend.
This inflatable structure is about half the size of a football pitch and it's entirely lit by all natural light. Once you enter the illuminarium through an airlock chamber, you're invited to explore the winding tunnels and the cavernous dome.
We get a lot of very strong reactions to it, from amazement to feelings of wonder, and it's for all ages as well. It's not just for children. Nearly 100% of the people go out feeling a lot happier than when they came in, and more refreshed.
This colourful escape is part of a wider festival that's set to brighten up this weekend. Vanessa Taff, STV News, Greenock.
Well, earlier on, we mentioned the possibility of Eurovision coming to Scotland, and it may well be coming to Glasgow.
Here's a wee thing for you, Emma. This is fascinating. I think it is anyway. So, the first time it's been in Scotland. Do you know where it was before?
I do not, John.
Edinburgh. Do you know when?
Nope.
1972. Do you know who won it?
I do not.
The New Seekers. Do you know who one of the singers was in the New Seekers? Eve
I
Graham.
do not.
Do you know where she was from? Do you want me to keep going?
I'm a big fan here.
If you want to be a presenter of it, you're going to have to up your game and know this stuff.
Oh la la, mon ami. Neil Poix from Edinburgh. That's all from us tonight. Bye-bye.
Good night.